Welcome to Ask Psych Sessions with Marianne Lloyd, where we ask some of the best teachers we know questions from you, our audience. This is a two-part series featuring interviews aimed at amplifying the conversation around equity, diversity, and inclusion in the classroom and in higher education. It is meant to be practical, to help everyday teachers like us identify and engage in steps toward inclusive pedagogical practices and systemic changes. No matter where you are in your understanding of equity, diversity, and inclusion, we think you will find these conversations helpful and enlightening. And now, please enjoy EDI Ask Psych Sessions with Marianne Lloyd.
Our guest today is Milton Fuentes from Montclair State University, and we're going to talk our continued conversation around issues of race and racism in the classroom. Thanks for joining us, Milton.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
So one of the reasons that I wanted to chat with you is that you have been doing some work specifically around syllabi and making those more inclusive. Could you tell our listeners about that, please?
Sure. I think it's a great opportunity to set the tone very early around how we're going to promote issues related to equity, diversity, and inclusion in the classroom and in our courses. I think a lot of faculty are thinking about it and are probably doing a number of things related to EDI or equity, diversity, and inclusion already, but they're not making it very explicit in the syllabus. And so I think there might be a great opportunity here to highlight and set the tone very early on with students. And so I've got an article that's coming out hopefully in the next few weeks. My hope is that it comes out soon so that faculty can use it to guide their efforts as they prepare their syllabi for this fall. But the hope is that faculty make a number of these things explicit. So, one of the things we suggest is to adopt a diversity-centered approach, right? So don't think about diversity in a singular way or in a way that you check the box and it's a one and done kind of experience. You want to think about how can you infuse diversity throughout the course, in the course syllabus, in the learning objectives, in the readings. How can you think about the conversations you're going to have and how you can promote conversations around diversity? If there's not much said about diversity in that particular area or topic, how can you highlight that and create an opportunity for students to think about what might this mean for diverse populations and what might this mean for future research? As we have the students in the classroom who are thinking about research projects, so on and so forth. So there, in this article, the hope is that we can think through all of these issues. I know that at Montclair State, one of the things I try to do with the faculty is, as they propose new courses, I have them, look at the syllabus and at least have one reference to diversity, something like, in this course, issues related to diversity will be discussed or something like that. Because oftentimes when faculty prepare their courses, the course description oftentimes guides a lot of the efforts in that particular course. If a faculty member is inheriting a course description and there's nothing related to diversity in the course description, what I advise folks to do is, after you do the traditional course description from the course catalog, write something like and my course description, and that's an opportunity to highlight things that matter and are important to you, and hopefully diversity will make it in that course description. The other thing we advise faculty to do is to think about the readings, who's being promoted through the readings, and also not to just to pick scholars of color or diverse scholars in the readings, but to make that very explicit. I had an experience a few semesters ago where I included two particular scholars of color, one Latinx scholar who's out in California, and another Black scholar who's right up the street at Rutgers, and both women and both scholars of color. And the students just assumed that they were men who were writing the articles, because I guess they've just been socialized to think that a particular person or a particular gender writes in psychology. And so I learned from that moment on to make it very explicit. So next week we're going to be reading some work by Nancy Boyd Franklin, an African American scholar at Rutgers, who does a lot of work with Black families in therapy. And so I'll do something like that just to really make it explicit. And that's not arbitrary, or that's not something simple. When I do something like that, it's very meaningful for students of color in particular. If you look at some of the work by Claude Steele, when students see themselves in the classroom, at the university, in the faculty, in the readings, that clearly communicates that there are folks out there who are like me, who are successful, and that helps with self-efficacy and really supports their efforts. So it's that kind of stuff. I don't want to give away the whole entire article, but I think it's an exciting piece. In writing the article, we noticed that there's not much. There's a lot out there about how to do this work in the classroom, but there's not a lot out there about how to do this in the syllabus. And so we're very excited about getting this out there and filling this void in the field of psychology.
So if you're up for it, I would really like to go back to what you were just talking about, because I think it's an important point for people that haven't, maybe explicitly recognized, the majority culture in psychology, right, is white. Certainly in parts of the field, it's also male, and that kind of implicit centering. I don't know if centering is the best word for what we're seeing here, but just that when you've never had to realize that you're constantly being reflected, that impact that it has when you then make sure that other people are also reflected in the space, right? And so that's what that is doing. And when you don't do that, you're sending a message that I would hope most of our colleagues don't want to send, which is that this is not your space, right? Or this is not your time to contribute. Is that a good sort of reason for why, if someone feels like, oh, I feel like if I say that I might be tokening someone, but that's not the goal, right? The goal is to sort of uncenter the whiteness of the field.
Exactly.
I say that as a white female, right? So obviously, my femaleness is showing that females can be professors in the class, but it's still showing whiteness as the model of expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I some of my research is on skin color, and as a light-skinned Puerto Rican male, I recognize the power and privilege that's associated with my skin color, and also the power and privilege that's associated with passing. If students didn't know my last name, Fuentes, which clearly communicates that I'm Latino, I have the privilege of passing, and so it's really important that I highlight all aspects of my sociocultural profile so that students can make meaningful and important connections in the classroom. The other thing I want to highlight, Marianne, is just when we talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, while the three terms mean something unique for each term, they're also interrelated. So when I spend some time highlighting diversity in the syllabus, I'm also promoting inclusion and promoting equity. When I'm trying to pick a pedagogy that leads to equity, that ensures access and equal outcomes for all students, I'm also tapping into issues related to diversity and inclusion. I'm promoting a sense of inclusion in the classroom. So that the three terms are interrelated in my mind, and inform each other. But I do think one of the points that you made earlier is important, that we do need to spend some time thinking through what assumptions are we making about the course, the discipline of psychology. What are we centering? What are we not centering? And that requires us to spend some time thinking about who we are as individuals, how we've been socialized, what might be our biases. In the article and in obviously in other works, people are always asked to pause and reflect on their particular sociocultural profile. Who am I? How might who I am play out in the classroom? How might I highlight aspects of students in the classroom? How might I dismiss them or ignore them? So on and so forth. So I think when we talk about issues related to equity, diversity, and inclusion, we need to think about who we are as individuals and try to raise our cultural consciousness around ourselves so that we can then give this area the attention it deserves in the classroom.
Yeah, so let's talk about classrooms a little bit. I like what you just said there, sort of perked up my ears, right? I want to create policies that are equitable. Can you give like an example of, maybe a change that you've made when you realized that something wasn't working well, or something you absolutely, would fight extremely in a department meeting if someone wanted to make a departmental policy that you felt was not equitable? Because I would hope that is an appealing idea for faculty is creating equitable policies. And I think it's probably pretty easy to maybe not realize when you've failed to do that.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that's important to highlight here is that we need to think about the institutions we work at and how they think about equity and are they equity minded. So we're not, as institutions, we're not protected from the inequities that exist in society. So we have to, and I'm quoting someone's work here, and hopefully that person's name will come to mind. But we do need to think about how those inequities from greater society are making their way into the university, and how are they playing out. And equity-minded institutions, first of all, recognize that these inequities exist in our institutions. The next thing they do is they tend not to take a student deficit approach when it comes to these inequities. I was engaging in a conversation with some faculty a few months ago, and there were issues clearly related to equity here, and faculty preferred to highlight the students that we're accepting and how we're lowering standards, and how that's going to contribute to the challenges in the classroom. While some of that may be true, what are we doing? How might we be contributing to those dynamics? What pedagogies are we adopting that might be exacerbating these dynamics? Like, for example, there's some really good research around active teaching that says that not only is active teaching good for everyone, but it's especially good for students of color and first generation students. And while the lecture may have a place in our teaching approach, it can create inequities in the classroom if it's the only tool we use. There was a great article in the New York Times about 3 years ago about how the traditional lecture may be contributing to inequity. So that's something that I consciously think about. What am I doing in the classroom, and how might everybody benefit from this? Another thing that I recently did, and it seems like just a simple thing, and the idea of scaffolding has been around for a while, but I found that in one of my classes, I expected students to do a literature review. So identify a diagnosis, write about that diagnosis, think about cultural variables and how they relate to that diagnosis. So more kind of epidemiological stuff. So how does this diagnosis look across cultural groups, gender groups, race and ethnicity? And then I asked them to look at the scholarship related to the treatment of this diagnosis. And we would have an amazing semester, right? So great connections, and the students felt heard and supported. And then this assignment would arrive at the end of the semester, and at the end of the semester, I would return their papers, and it just it didn't go well. Either the writing didn't go well, or the citing didn't go well, or they didn't understand um, what a randomized controlled trial study was. And these were advanced students, and so I it was just a head scratcher for me. Like, how are they making it to their junior and senior year and not knowing like what an RCT is, a randomized controlled trial study? And so something's off. And not only is something off with this student, but something is off with how we're preparing these students. And so I tried different things. I had them do the tutorial on the APA website. I did APA citation workshops in the classroom, and nothing seemed to work. And I would continue to have the same experience of, at the end of the semester, students being incredibly disappointed with their grade, and it it ended the semester in a way that I didn't want to end the semester. I wanted it to end with all the good energy that we had enjoyed over the course of the semester. And so I started doing scaffolding this past semester, where they wrote the first page of the paper and handed it over, and I gave them lots of feedback and let them know what was going well, what wasn't going well. And then the second part came in, and then the third part, and we just had, by the end of the whole experience, they were doing better, they were writing better, they were citing appropriately, and it just led to just a much better experience for everyone. And so I think taking this kind of approach in the classroom is important, right? So I often advise faculty. I used to direct the teaching and learning center at the university, and so I would advise faculty, just keep good notes on your syllabus, about what's working, what's not working. And when you go to prepare the course for the next semester, pull out that syllabus, take a look at those notes, see what you need to tweak and revise, just to strengthen the course. And that's related to just humility, right? As we do this work, we never reach an endpoint here, around cultural work or cultural competence, where it's constantly evolving. And so as we do issues related to equity, diversity, inclusion, we have to embrace humility as we do this work. The moment that there's some interesting research around people who deem themselves to be experts. So when you deem yourself to be an expert on something, you're very comfortable and confident around the topic, and you become somewhat dogmatic and closed-minded. And those aren't great variables when it comes to doing good cultural work in the classroom. We want to keep an open mind and realize that there's a lot to be gained from multiple perspectives.
And also that if you're not an expert yet, that doesn't mean you shouldn't start trying to work towards getting a level of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. In that article I mentioned earlier, I don't know if folks have read the book by James Lang called Small Teaching, but in that book, he just encourages faculty to start small, do little things that will make big changes in the classroom. And that's what I encourage faculty to do when it comes to issues related to equity, diversity, and inclusion. If you read the article, you might become overwhelmed by everything that I'm suggesting, or everything that I and my co-authors are suggesting. But start small. Maybe, build in a diversity statement, or maybe add a cultural element to your course description, or maybe add a diversity-centered learning objective, right? Start off small, or add a few readings here and there, see how it goes, and then over the course of time, the course just, gets better and better. So I think you're right that there's a steep learning curve here, but the only way to get there is to get started, and it's okay to start small.
Well, that's great. So I think, very clear. Start small, be humble about it, and don't let yourself get sucked into reading forever. So those are really good suggestions that I think our listeners can take. Is there any last thing you would want to make sure people know about from your experience in this space?
I think when you speak with faculty, or when I speak with faculty, And I asked them about their values and goals in the classroom. I never hear faculty say, I don't want my students to learn anything, or I'd like my students to fail miserably. Those aren't goals and values that faculty tend to aspire or embrace. So we've got notable goals and we've got these really impressive values. Why not then align our efforts in the classroom with our goals and values? We definitely have much more clarity around how to do these things and how to make sure that our goals are actualized and our values are embraced. So let's start making those important and meaningful connections. I'm just trying to find here the reference here. Also, it's in terms of equity-minded institutions. I wanted to make sure I give credit to this scholar. It's Ben Simon, 2007, who's written some good work around developing equity-mindedness for institutions. So I want to give that credit. But that's my I guess my take-home message here. To if we're interested in actualizing our goals and our values, let's start making those important and relevant connections, and let's start small. Let's take a dive into the literature. As soon as the article gets released, I'll happily share it with you and all the communities out there, so that we can start doing this important work in the syllabus and in the classroom.
Great. Well, I look forward to reading it and getting started. Thanks so much for your time. Take care.
My pleasure. Take good care. Bye-bye.